Okay, so looking at the solution of the exercise where you combine arrays with functions. So you can see this is the prototypes that I've given you before during the exercise handout or the exercise layout. You have to create these two functions for me, max value and min value, and you have to receive an array. So let's first look at our main function. If I scroll down, the main function is still the same as before. We're printing out our initial array, we're capturing values from the user, storing it to the array, then we're printing out the array again to confirm that these user values are indeed in the array. And then we have these three lines. This we've seen before, where we print an average value, but that average value is returned from our custom function, because here we're calling our custom function. So the custom function average array will go and calculate that value and return it here back to our printf. Then these two last lines does the same for minimum and maximum value. We're calling our maximum value function here, so we're sending it our array, we're invoking it and sending it our array. Then this function must calculate must find the maximum value, and then that maximum value is returned back to the printf, and the printf will simply insert that maximum value here into the string. And the same thing goes for the minimum value. So it says here the minimum value is, go and find it. It invokes min value, sends it the array, and min value must go through that array, find the minimum value and return it back here to printf. Okay, so let's go and see the custom functions. This we've seen before. It's our function to print to the screen to calculate the average value. Okay, and here we get to our first custom function that we've added for this exercise, which is max value. So the purpose of it is to return the maximum element value that was found in the array. So we once again have to declare our counter variable, so because it's local only to this function. And very important, I've also declared a max val. Okay, you can call it what you want. This is just short for maximum value, and I didn't want to call it the same as the function name, because you cannot have two of the same names, even if it's the one is a function name and the other one is a variable name. The names cannot be the same. Right, so I just call it max val, and very important, I initialized max val to the first element value. Alright, why did I do that? It will become clear just now when we go through the rest of the function. But the purpose of this variable is to contain the maximum value that we found in the array. Now remember, there's a sequence, there's a few steps. You're not going to find the maximum value when you just look at the first element value. You must go through the entire array to eventually know that you have actually found the maximum value. Okay, and that's what we're doing with this loop here. This loop's purpose is to find the maximum array value. So you can see that we start the loop by initializing I to 1, not to 0. Why is that? Because I actually want to start comparing the second value with our max value. So up here we're saying, let's assume the very first value in our array is the max value. So we make an assumption. Okay, we just say, let's assume the first value is the maximum value. Then when we get to the loop, we don't have to look at the first value again. We already assumed it is the max value. Now we start with the second value. That's why I is 1. And we're going to go through all the array elements, I less than size. So it's going to go from 1 to 9. So we're going to look at element 2 to 10 with this loop. And then what do? Inside we use an if selection structure, right? Because we need to make a comparison. Okay, we need to see the value, the current value of our array, AI. Okay, what is I? I is 1, which means A1 will be the second element. We're taking that, we're reading or retrieving it from the array, and then we're comparing it to see, is it larger than max val, which is this value up here. So effectively what we are doing is we are checking to see, is element 2 larger than the largest value that we have found so far. When currently our assumption just been made is our first element value is the max. Okay, that might be true for our array, depends, or it might not. So if the second element is bigger than the current maximum value that we found so far, So in other words, if the second element is bigger than the first element, because we wrote the first element to max val, then what do? We update max val. Max val now becomes the new value AI, which is the bigger value. Okay, max val now gets the value of the second element. Okay, because it's bigger than max val. So whenever we find an element value inside the array that is larger than our maximum value that we found so far, we're going to update it to say our new maximum value is this current value that we're looking at. And then of course the if is done, the loop will repeat. Then we'll go look at the third element. Is the third element bigger than the max val? If it is, update our max val. If it's not, if this if is not true, that will not execute. It simply will just go back for another iteration of the loop. If it is true, it will first update and then go back for another iteration of the loop. So you can see now we look at element 2, compare it, element 3, compare it, element 4, compare it, element 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way through to 10 and compare it. So by the end of this loop, when this loop is done, we have compared all the values with the maximum value that we have found up to that point. So meaning when we get to the last value in the array, we would have found the maximum value, and that will be present or stored in our max val variable. So that's why after the loop we can now just simply return whatever value is stored in max val. Alright, and we use almost exactly the same logic in our next function, min val. Here we're just doing the opposite. We have to search for the smallest or lowest value. Alright, so once again it receives an array. We have a locally defined I counter variable, and this time I have a value integer variable called min val. Once again I assign it to immediately initialize it to my first array element value. So I'm just making the assumption, let's say it's the minimum value, and then here, okay, see that is actually not necessary there anymore. Okay, so then when we get here to the loop, now the loop starts comparing from the second element on. Okay, so the second element on, we compare, is AI maybe less than min val. So is the second element less than the minimum value that we have found so far? Okay, we know in this case it will be the first element's value. If this is true, then we update min val. Min val becomes our current array element value, which we know is less than min val. Okay, when the if is done, or if it was skipped altogether, we go for the second iteration of the loop. Now I becomes 2. So now here we are comparing the third element with whatever the minimum value is. We don't know. It might have been the first value, or it might have been the second one. We don't know. What we do know is whatever the minimum value is that we have found up to that point will be stored in min val. That's what we ensure by doing these two steps here. So we compare to see, is the current array element less than min val? If it is, then make min val this current array element value. So it's the new minimum value. And then we keep on doing that element for element until we reach the end of the array, which will be the end of the loop, the 10th iteration. So we know when the loop is done, the minimum value in the array would now be stored in min val. And that's why the final step here in this custom function is to return min val. Okay, so we go back up here to our main function. So basically that's what happens here. When we call max val in this printf statement, printf sends max val, our custom function, the array that we have, which contains our user's input. So this array that we've declared here, we've stored user input into it, we printed it out, and here we are sending that same array to max val. Max val will take this array, go through it one by one, and find the maximum value, return it back to printf. Printf will receive this value. Printf is the caller of the custom function. It will receive this value, insert it into the string right here, and therefore complete the string, and will print to the screen the maximum value is, and there we'll put in whatever value was returned by max val, and likewise for minimum value. Alright, and that is the solution to the exercise.